Hey, welcome everyone. Today, more than ever, the world needs voices that spark change, ignite hope, and drive transformation. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when individuals choose to step forward, speak up, and take bold action. Whether you're leading a global movement or making a difference in your own community, your voice has power. In this podcast, we aim to amplify those voices, share the journeys of resilience change makers, and inspire each of you to recognize your potential to impact the world. Let's create a ripple effect together. This message taps into the concept of collective empowerment and emphasizes the significance of individuals' contributions in driving social change. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards. And today, with our beautiful guest, Misty Shields, we're going to be talking about the power of love can heal. And I really love this title because you guys have heard me talk on this show many, many times that we need to spread a lot more love. This whole world can change in so many good ways if we just started sharing a little bit more love and have more empathy for others. So, Misty, thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon to be with us today. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't even remember. I talked to so many people. I can't even remember how we found each other connected. Do you?
Yeah, yes, I do. So I am a part of a chapter in Utah called BNI, Business Networking International. And within
Okay.
that chapter, there's a really awesome guy named Charles Pigott. And when I met him and we were talking about addiction and our stories, he was like, "You need to go on Al's podcast." I was like, okay. So then he connected us that way.
I
So
love it. So,
yeah,
Charles, thank you. I know Charles very well. Charles is an amazing man. He has an amazing story himself.
he
So,
does.
Charles, thank you so much for
He is
connecting.
a force for good in this world for sure.
Yes, yes, he is. You got that right, 100%. So Misty, we was talking before we actually started recording. You and I have some similarities in what's happened in our life here in the past. You know, um, you're basically on the other side of the addiction, or you have come from the other side of addiction. What what was life like for you at that time? Because for us, and I know I've been told quite a few times, it's not our place to tell the other person's story, right? That's their story to tell. However, there are bits and pieces that I still share that really affected my life. And again, I'm not putting the blame on them because I allowed myself to stay into that for a long period of time. I don't know if that's something you found yourself in that same type of pool.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely stayed in it longer than maybe I should have. No, I don't think so. I think I stayed in it for just the right amount of time for me to get just the right amount of answers and to be able to move on and leave saying I did everything I could and it didn't work. Right. And I
Yeah.
think that the experiences that I had with the addict in my life shaped me and defined me and made me a better person. So, it's hard to know. Like, it's not my story. The addiction isn't my story to share, and I can't speak to that, but I can speak to how the addiction affected me in my life. And there is a story there, at least for me, there is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I don't know. For me, I found myself addicted to the addiction. Did you find yourself that way as well?
I don't know if I can speak to that. I was a little bit blindsided by all of my story is very unique. And I think I was caught off guard by the addiction. I was pretty naive and wanted to believe that there wasn't a problem and trying to make things work. But looking back now, I can see how it was there all along. And I just didn't know what to look for. So and in my life, I grew up with a good bit of a broken home with lots of addiction and lots of drug issues and alcohol and suicide ideation and completion and just a lot of different things. And so I was exposed to all of that, but I tried so hard to break away from that course that I think in my head I was just like, this isn't my life. Like, no, that's not what's happening. I just tried to do everything opposite so that I could have a different life. But then it still ended up finding its way in there. So I don't think I could say that I was addicted to the addiction. for a minute, I thought I could help, like I could be the reason or be enough to pull that person out of the addiction. But I quickly realized that that wasn't the case,
Yeah.
and once I realized like what I was getting into, I set pretty firm boundaries. Um, and so it got wrapped up a little bit quicker than I think most people. So with that, I can just kind of share my story and then go from there. And to start, currently, what I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. And so after I went through everything I went through, I went back to school and got this degree. And I was going to become a family nurse practitioner, but right at the very last minute, I was just like, you know what? I've been through too much in this life, and God has preserved my life for a reason. And I think that I can really help. So at the very last minute, I changed my degree to getting my psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner because I just feel like I've learned so much about mental health and so much about addiction that I couldn't keep that for myself. Like I needed to share that because I think there's other people that maybe can relate to me and maybe I can help. And maybe I can't. And if I can't, that's fine. But I know that there's more to my story than just for me. Like it didn't happen just for me. It's too amazing and awesome for it to have just been about me. So I guess like I kind of shared a little bit that I grew up, you know, my parents were divorced. My dad had a lot of mental health, or I should say has a lot of mental health issues, a lot of alcohol abuse and drug abuse in my family, and a lot of abuse too. Um, and so I wanted something different. I wanted to change the course. I wanted to do all the things I thought I was supposed to do so that I could have this beautiful life because I knew it was possible for me. So I was, when I went to college, I was pretty determined that I was only going to date guys who already were graduated from school. I only wanted to date returned missionaries. I was only going to get married in the temple. And that guy had to have an amazing family because I didn't have that amazing of a family. And I really, really wanted that. And so those were things that were so high on my list. And I wasn't even compromising. Like I knew what I wanted, and that's what I was going for. So here I am at 21, I was 21, and I meet the guy, and he has an amazing family, and he has a job, he's graduated, he's high functioning, he's fun, all of these things, right? So I was like, okay, I did it. I found it. I'm going to move forward. And, we are dating, whatever. I'm young. I don't think I didn't have a lot of guidance in my life. I feel like the story might have been different had I had someone mentoring me or at least helping me a little bit, but didn't have a great relationship with parents. I have a large family, but I always kind of say that my family's so big that I don't have any family at all because there's just so many of us. It's hard to have like connections. And at that time in my life, I didn't really have anyone that was mentoring me. Like I was just kind of on my own doing my thing and what I felt was right. And looking back, I'm like, I think it would have been good had I had someone like being like, oh, did you think about this? Or, but
Yeah.
I didn't. And so we got engaged. And quickly after we got engaged, I just had this feeling that it was wrong, like that I wasn't supposed to. But he had done this elaborate proposal, like a full day, bought this huge ring. Like it was a whole thing. We told so many people, and I just didn't have it in me to call it off. And I was praying about it, and I just felt like feeling, just felt like God was like, dude, if this is what you want, the feeling that I got was, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. So I was like, okay, there's my answer. I'll be okay. So I went forward and didn't really look back from there. And we got married. And the first year was pretty good, like pretty good, not too bad. I was in school. I was going to the nursing. I was in the nursing program at the University of Utah, doing all my things, busy doing life. And it was okay. And then we moved to Washington State because the story is about my ex-husband. So my husband at the time, he got a job working in Washington State. So we took a job and we moved there. Quickly after moving there, things changed. Like he really pulled back, wasn't wanting to go to church with me anymore. He was just really pulled back, and I didn't know why. And he wouldn't talk to me. He was really getting very depressed, and I didn't know why. Like everything for him was good. He got this great job. He was super excited about it. Like, we were doing pretty good, all things considered, but he was just not doing good. And I was just like, well, that's okay. Like, just keep living life, keep going about doing what I'm doing. But our marriage was struggling and suffering. And I later learned that he had started cheating on me with a stripper, like started like going to strip clubs and having sex with strippers or people on Craigslist, like ads and things like that. And so looking back, I'm like, oh, that all makes sense why I just felt that there was something wrong, but I couldn't put a finger on it. I had no idea. I had no idea. He was the type of person that needed his time. Like he needed to like be doing whatever. Like he would like to go, what I thought he was doing was like go to a movie by himself or just go have some time, go for a drive. Little did I know he was actually going to strip clubs or different places like that. So we lived in Washington, but right on the border of Oregon. So right like 20 minutes from downtown Portland, Oregon.
Hmm.
So there were a lot of options and places for him to go there. And I just didn't know. So, and he also started gambling. And I didn't love that, but I also didn't feel like I could say anything because he was making a lot more money than I was making. And so I felt like, whatever, if he wants to go do that, I don't love it, but he doesn't care that I don't love it. So I don't really have to say. So that was happening. And I didn't realize how bad that was either. So our marriage is pretty awful. Like he's doing these things. He's making me feel like it's my fault, like I'm crazy, constantly telling me that I was a terrible communicator and difficult to live with, and just all of these things. And I was constantly like trying to improve my communication skills and think about it. I'm like, well, I've never had anyone else tell me that in my entire life, but he's telling me that, and he's getting mad at me all the time, just always. I was always getting yelled at for stupid things. Like I could park the car wrong and he would just lose it on me and he would just leave. Like if we went somewhere with the kids, he would like at night just leave. And I was just like, in my head, I told myself he just needs his space. He needs his time. And that's what he's doing. And I was pretty good. He had one night a week, every week that was his time and he could go do whatever he wanted. And usually it was by himself. And I was just like, well, whatever. I'm like, his social battery is drained. He just needs to go. But later I found out he wasn't by himself. He was going to like adult bookstores and gambling places or like casinos and strip halls and things like that.
Wow.
So once I found out all of this, then I then it all made more sense. Like all the times that he told me I was crazy, I was like, oh, turns out I wasn't crazy. So so we have two kids. And I felt super, super strongly about having another baby, like very, very strongly about this. But I was like, what? This is insanity. My marriage is the worst. Like, I do
Oh,
not even like him. Like, he makes me feel so bad. Like, I would see people post like on Facebook or Instagram. It was like Facebook at the time, like, oh, my husband's my best friend. I love him so much. And I'm like, is that real? Like, do people
that's
really feel that
possible.
way? I'm like, because I don't feel that way at all. But I was trying, I was like living the life, acting the act. Like nobody knew that I was struggling in my marriage. I didn't tell a soul. Like nobody knew anything. So I don't feel good about getting pregnant, or I don't feel like getting pregnant again is the right thing with that man, but I felt so strongly that it was the right thing. And so we tried to get pregnant and we did. I always had a hard time getting pregnant. And so it took us a little bit, but we finally did. And and it was awful. Like he was so awful to me during the pregnancy. I just cried every day, like just bawled. Finally went to therapy because I was just like, and he was just telling me it was my fault. We go to a therapist, I kind of like say stuff, and basically she told me that I was hormonal and I needed to just be grateful for the life we have.
oh my goodness gracious.
And that made me feel even worse because he just sat there and lied. He didn't say anything. Like I was having all these feelings and he wasn't owning it. So during that pregnancy, we went on like a little like baby moon type thing to try to like help our marriage, like help it somehow. And it was during that he told me, so we at the time, or I was active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like I went every week. he wasn't going, but he also wasn't saying that he wasn't going. It was just this really like wedge in our relationship that we weren't allowed to talk about. So, so when you're a member of the church, you know, we don't drink, we don't smoke, like that's just something that we don't do, right? And so that was something that we didn't do. And he started doing little things like drinking coffee. And I was like, whatever, like that's fine. Like I don't love it, but I'm like, that's not going to hurt anybody. Like I don't really care. There would be times that he would like come home from like a work trip and I could smell alcohol on him. And I'd be like, you smell like alcohol. And he's like, oh, the guy next to me was drinking on the plane. And I was just dumb. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Whatever. So then he tells me on this baby moon that he's been drinking and that he wants to drink because he thinks it will make him happy. And that like look, it was such a like a slap in the face, like gut punch to me. Like looking back now, like it seems so silly, but to me and for what I wanted for my family and what I thought I had, it was like everything was getting taken away from me. Like all of this stuff was already bad, but then he was sitting here saying this to me. And so it was this whole thing. Um, but he just, and I told him that I didn't love that. I didn't want him to do that. And he's like, well, and then this was like a week or so later. He came home drunk. And I was just like, this isn't okay. And he basically said to me, he's like, well, this is what's going to make me happy. And I said, okay. And he's like, this is what's going to get me friends. And this is what's going to make me happy. And I was just like, so you're saying that me and the girls aren't enough for you? And
Yeah.
he's like, no, this is what's missing in my life. And this is what's going to make me happy. And I just remember that hurt me so badly. Here I am pregnant. I think I was like 7 months pregnant with our third baby. And he's sitting there telling me this. And I'm just like, wow, you know? So then I was just like, so then I started questioning everything. I'm like, okay, well, how important is it to go to church? Like, how important is all of this stuff? Am I willing to give up like, to choose that over my marriage and my family? Because he's not wanting to do it. He's not wanting to participate in it. And I want my family to be together. And I absolutely do not want to live a life without God in it. Like that is 100% my core belief and value. And I'm not willing to do that. So then I was just like praying my guts out on what to do. And I just had this impression that, maybe go to other churches and maybe he'll come along with you and try doing that. So I did. I was like, okay, let's go check out these other churches and see like if we find our place there and if it makes you feel more comfortable, because ultimately I want to live our life and teach our girls about God. And if you can't go to this church, then I'm willing to try to go somewhere else. So we went to a few different churches and had really good experiences. But for me, it just wasn't the whole thing. And he still wasn't going. He still was like not really participating, and he was leaving, and he was just a mess. And I was just heartbroken. I literally thought my baby was going to be born with depression because I cried so much during my pregnancy. Oh,
Yeah.
and he also started smoking and hiding that from me during the pregnancy. Like I went to get in his car one day and it was just like smelled like cigarette smoke. And I was like, what the heck? And so that happened. So anyway, fast forward, I had my third baby and pregnancy goes perfectly. It was a planned C-section, but my pregnancy was healthy. I didn't have any issues at all. Baby was born perfectly healthy, all of the things. And a week later, I went for my well baby check, like just to make sure baby was good and I was good and everything looked good. Blood pressure was good. I was like, my stitches looked good and everything. And then that night, I had a grand mal seizure in the middle of the night. And I was seizing for a good amount of time because I was sleeping in bed, obviously next to my husband, and he slept like a bear. Like I could, like waking him up was such a challenge. Like the man didn't wake up, but he felt me seizing next to him and called 911. And I didn't come to until the paramedics were already in my room
Wow.
at the house. So this big seizure, my sister happened to be there. Like that was a total God thing. Like she had flown in from Idaho or maybe she was living in Utah at the time, but she came in and she was there with us. And so she stayed with my other two, well, no, all three girls as they took me in an ambulance to the hospital. And it was like a crazy time, right? And when I came to, I didn't remember that I had a baby. Like It was like the weirdest thing. It was so crazy. So they take me in, and fast forward a few hours and tests later, they found out that I have a brain tumor. So I was like, okay. So that was like this whole crazy thing. So they find out I have a brain tumor. They're telling me that, and it's a pretty good sized one, about the size of a golf ball. And they're saying, because it's perfectly round, and they're saying that the only reason I had a seizure was because after having a baby, there's a huge fluid shift that happens in your body. And that fluid shift caused some inflammation around the tumor. So the tumor became inflamed, and that inflammation crossed the midline barrier of the brain. And that's what caused me to have a seizure. And so to this day, I call my baby my angel baby, because
Yeah,
I honestly think had I not had her, they would not have found this tumor,
that,
because you don't
that's what I,
find, yeah, you
well,
don't find brain tumors early. Like, you just don't find them
yeah,
until it's too late. And so, but they caught mine early, and they were all saying that it was benign and that I probably didn't need to operate, that, just it's going to be okay. So we got a few opinions, and one doctor said, don't do anything. And we're like, that doesn't feel right. So then we had another opinion, and he was like, listen, and this never happens. Like, neurosurgeons are the most egotistical people in the world. And I can speak to this because I'm a nurse and I've worked in the hospital. But surgeons are one level, and neurosurgeons are like next level when it comes to ego and thinking that they're like God on earth, you know?
yeah,
And this neurosurgeon said to me, he said to us, he said, if you were my family member, like if you were my wife or my daughter, I would tell you to go somewhere else, because where your tumor is located is in such a sensitive area and high likelihood of paralyzing you that, if I were you, I'd either go to UCSF in San Francisco, or I would go to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. And we were like, okay. So at the time, we had a certain type of insurance called Kaiser insurance, which is something that's kind of specific to California and like the Northwest. And they only allow you to go to Kaiser facilities. So so my baby was born at the end of September, and this was October, like right in the middle of October. And his company, who was amazing, Fisher Investments, I'll always be appreciative of them. They agreed to change our health insurance in October to United Healthcare so that I could go to these other facilities, which is just unheard of.
wow,
And at the time, I was like praying for a sign. Like, I didn't want to have brain surgery. Hello, I had three little kids, a brand new baby. I did not want to have brain surgery. And I said, I don't just need like an answer. I need a neon sign saying that you need to do this, because I have one doctor telling me I don't need to, and another doctor telling me that I should, and I feel fine. And I don't want to
yeah.
do any of this. And so that happened. And I was like, well, and I had just barely said that to my sister. I was like, I need a neon sign. And then his company called, and they were like, we're going to change your insurance so Misty can go to these other facilities. And I was like, dang, that's a neon sign.
There,
So
there it is.
there it is. So there it is. So after I got diagnosed with this brain tumor, he fell apart. So when you have a seizure, they don't allow you to drive, because they don't know what's causing the seizure, and they don't know if it's going to happen again. So they just say you can't drive for 6 months or 3 months or something like that following a seizure. So they called it, my community was amazing, and they called it the tumor Uber. They were like picking me up and taking my kids places, driving me to appointments. And all the while, Matt, that was his name, was just a disaster. Like, he thought I was going to die. And so that made all of his skeletons come out of his closet. So all of these secrets that he'd had from me, um, he got sloppy. And the way he got sloppy was he started drinking heavily. So this one day in particular, this was like a week after I found out I had a brain tumor. I don't think we had met with a couple. I think we had actually gone, I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't very long after. I don't know if I had the surgery scheduled yet. I don't think I did. Um, but no, I hadn't. It was just before going. But my daughter had piano, and I was like, can you just go get her after work? Because I couldn't do it. And I didn't want to ask one of my neighbors to go do it. And he very much could do that. And so he picked her up, but he came home drunk, and he drove with her in the car. And I was so mad. I was so mad. And he just was like mad at me that I was upset. And he just wanted me to tell him that I loved him and that he was the best and that I needed him. And he was just ridiculous. And so I was so upset with him. And he just wasn't going to work. And he was just a mess. And that night, I had this activity through my church that they were doing that I really wanted to go to. I hadn't done anything, and life was just hard. And I really wanted to go to this thing. And I was so mad at him. So I got the kids to bed, like the little girls, because they were little. They were 5 and 3, for the ages of our other two kids, and then the new baby. So I got them to bed, and he was just moping, sad that he was mad that I was leaving. He was mad, whatever, all these things. And I was just mad. So I left. And when I left, he was sitting on the couch watching the TV. When I came home, like 3 hours later, I found him completely passed out on the couch. Like nothing had changed. I don't think he'd moved since I left, or I mean, he did a little bit, but I like picked up his arm and it just dropped to the couch. Like I was mad. So I was like banging pots and pans. I was doing the dishes. I was just pissed,
Like,
trying to be
wake up.
loud, trying to have him wake up and see that he's a jerk and that I'm doing all this stuff. And
Yeah.
um, he didn't wake up. So I just go and plop myself down on the couch next to him and I see his phone. It's on his lap and it's dead. So I pick it up and I go plug it in because I'm like, what's going on? Oh, and the other thing was, so I'd had a C-section. And so they gave me oxycodone for my C-section. And then I'd had a seizure. So they gave me a benzodiazepine, lorazepam, which at a high dose, like 2 milligrams, which is a good amount. Like it snowed me. They gave that to me and I slept through a whole MRI. Like I didn't even know I went and went. Like, and so he was drunk when I left. I come home, he's like completely out of it. So I go check those bottles. He took a bunch of my oxycodones and he took some of the lorazepam. Like he's just out to the world. He has a pulse, like he's living, but he is
Yeah.
just. So I plug in his phone, and the first thing that pops up was a picture of a naked girl, like some girl's butt, like pornography, which was frustrating to me because I'd asked him a million times about pornography and he denied, and kept telling me I was crazy and to stop asking him about it. Like he doesn't have a problem with this, like all of these things. And I was like, okay, so that came up on the phone. And then I realized he'd been downloading these apps that would block the pornography from him. And I didn't even know, or from me or from whoever is viewing so that you don't see it in their web history. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like I was the most naive girl out there. Like I just believed him when he told me that he wasn't, but I knew that he was, but I also wanted to believe that he wasn't. So that shows up there and I was just like, okay. So then I didn't say anything to him. I just started researching. What do you do when you find out your husband has a pornography addiction? And it's all like, you just gotta love them. It's not about you. Like, be there for them, support them, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I did. I didn't say anything to him. I just was trying. And I mean, hello, I was like, I just had a C-section. Like we weren't having sex. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't going to for a few weeks. Like I was still very much healing from that. Um, so I'm like, I can't really have sex with my husband because I physically can't. So, anyway, so then fast forward, we're out going to a first appointment in Mayo Clinic with a neuro-oncologist out there in Minnesota. So I'm just feeling mad. I'm feeling frustrated with him. He continues becoming home drunk. Like he's just a hot mess. Like he's just a mess. So, and I'm just trying to hold it all together. And we're out there, and I confronted him about it because it was just eating me alive. Like there was just so much going on, and his crap was just eating me alive. So I said to him, I said, I'm like, I need to talk to you about your pornography problem. And he's like, quit telling me that you think I have a pornography problem. And I'm like, Matt, I know you do. I saw it on your phone. And he's like, you saw nothing. He was just like denying it up and down. And I'm like, you downloaded this app. This was there. I know you're looking at it. And then he just started bawling, like uncontrollably, like bawling his eyes out and just telling me that he was so sorry and that he's had a problem since he was a teenager and he thought he could control it, but it's gotten control of him and just bawling. And I was just like, okay. And I was like, okay, well, what else is there? Because he'd lied to me about the alcohol, he'd lied to me about the smoking, and now he's lied to me about the pornography. And I said, okay, what else is there? I'm like, I'm already so broken. I'm like, just tell me right now, like, what else is there? And he's like, there's nothing else. What else could there be? That's what he said to me. And I said, okay. I'm like, just know that you telling me is so much better than me finding it out on my own. Like, you've got to tell me. And he's like, there's nothing else. Okay, fine. So fast forward, they do decide that I need to have brain surgery. So we go to Minnesota. I have the brain surgery. I was supposed to have just like gone home 2 days later. Like that's what they were thinking. But I did end up waking up with complete paralysis on the left side and left neglect, meaning I wasn't aware of anything on my left side, like nothing.
Wow.
So it was more severe than what they thought it would be. So I ended up having to stay there and go to inpatient rehab at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. And this was right before Christmas of 2016. So my baby was born at the end of September.
Mhm.
So she was 10 weeks old when I went in for brain surgery. Um, so that was a whole thing. And so then we were there and I wasn't doing good. Like I was weird. Like I was just staring at people. I couldn't smile. I couldn't, like, I was weird. It was not good. And he was there, but he chose to stay in a hotel instead of staying in the hospital with me. And I later found out that he was going and sleeping with prostitutes, like in the
While
evening
you're in the hospital?
while I'm in the hospital. Um, and that's his addiction, right? Like that was his coping mechanism.
Yeah.
He was in like that was what he was doing. But I don't know that at this time, right? I don't know anything. I just know that, oh, he needs his space. He's just staying in the hotel, like whatever. Like, even though there was a bed in the room, like he chose not to stay there with me. And I'm like, that's fine. I was too out of it to, I think, even realize. But looking back now, I'm like, he should have stayed. Like most husbands or spouses stay, and he didn't. So then we go home, and I had to go back out for this specific type of radiation that they only did in Minnesota, which I was another God thing. Like getting the neurosurgeon that I had was a God thing. Them being able to get me in, and they were able to do a full resection of the tumor. Like all of these things were incredible. And I did obviously like get motion back, and that came back, but I was still super delayed on my left side. Um, but they had this type of treatment there called proton beam therapy that at the time they didn't have anywhere else. And my doctors were there. And so we decided to have me live out there and do these treatments. It was going to take 8 weeks. And I was going to have different people come and stay with me because I was taking my baby. I wasn't going to leave my baby again after the surgery. I was like, no, I cannot leave her. So we arranged for people to be there with me because he needed to be there working. So he said, like he could have taken the time off. But his parents came and stayed with the girls, which was amazing. Like his parents are wonderful, and I'm so grateful for them. And so I went out there. The first day that we were driving out to get to I was flying out, I was supposed to fly out of Portland, but there was this huge winter storm that hit and it shut down the Portland airport. They get these ice storms there. So we ended up having to rearrange flight and drive to Seattle to get me to fly out of Seattle to Minnesota. I had a girlfriend that was going with me for the first setup. And so he drove us to Seattle and dropped us off. And he was being such a jerk. Oh, so they did find out that my tumor was cancerous at this point. I left that out. So it was cancerous. So I was needing to go through all this stuff. So he drives us there, and then he never makes it home. And I'm calling him, calling him, and he's not answering the phone. There is this ice storm. And so he said that he hit black ice and then decided to pull off. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, it didn't make sense to me, but that's what he said. So turns out that night, again, he went to some brothel or whatever it was and gambled like some like casino there and gambled like 10 grand
Jeez.
that night. And so his parents are with the girls. They don't know where he is. He's not coming home. He's not answering his phone. I'm worried sick about him. I'm in Minnesota getting ready to start this treatment. And he's MIA, not responding, not anything. So when we finally get a hold of him, that's the story he tells us. And I'm like, okay. Anyway. So then I'm out there for this 8 weeks. And during this time, he's not going to work. I'm worried sick about him. I'm like, He's depressed. I'm trying to get him in to see therapists. I'm trying to get him to go see a doctor. He won't go. And I'm here getting this treatment for my brain with the baby and all these people coming in to help me. And he is just a hot mess. And his parents are doing everything, but he says he's going to work, but he's not going to work. It's just terrible. Like he's just a mess. And then he did come out to see me a couple of times and bring our little girls. And when he came, he was yelling at me, like he was mad at me, fighting with me. Like it was just a nightmare, like such a mess. So I finished treatment there. I come back home and I had about like a 4-week window between finishing radiation and starting chemo. And so we were at home doing things like there's a bunch of stuff that's happening. Like I'm still very much not normal. Like I'm trying to get better. I'm doing these things, but my community is amazing. They're supporting and helping so much. But he continues to be a hot mess. And I'm worried about him and he won't get help. And I'm not really telling anybody because it's his story to tell. He doesn't want me to say anything to anybody. And I'm like, okay. So and I'm just heartbroken. Like I know things are bad and it's just terrible. Um, so there was a night where we were having people over for dinner and he was supposed to come over or come home for it, obviously. He said that he wasn't answering me, and he just didn't come home that night. And nothing was said. Like he came home the next morning and he was just a mess, like crying and telling me like how sorry he was. And that's when he told me that he was on a bunch of online like dating chat rooms. And I was like, okay, like another gut punch, right? Like
Yeah.
just already broken. And then he tells me this, and I'm like, okay, what else? What else is there? And nothing. He's like, there's nothing else. He's like, I just feel so bad that I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. Sorry, my light goes off in my office if
No,
I
that's
don't.
okay.
So, um, so let's see. So fast forward, like I started my first round of chemo and I'm doing okay. Like I'm not feeling great, but I'm doing really good, like way better than anyone anticipated that I'd be doing. Um, and he's being a jerk. Like he's not coming home. Something's up. I've never looked at his phone before, except for that one time when I plugged it in and found the pornography. I never looked at his phone. I just trusted him. I wanted to trust him. And I'm like, it's in the middle of the night and I have his phone and I have my phone and I'm looking at things and I see his emails are like completely clean. Nothing in spam, nothing in outbox, nothing pending. Like there's nothing there. That should have been my first sign, but I didn't even think of that. So there were just a couple things in a like spam like inbox. So I clicked on them and it was a response to a Craigslist listing. And in there it was I didn't know what it was. I was like some bar, like meet up at some bar, and it was like cocksucker. That's what it said. I don't know if I can say that stuff on here.
That's fine.
That's what it said. And so that same night that he didn't come home, like that was a few weeks prior, it was that same date because I remember the date because it was significant to me that he didn't
Yeah.
come home. It was that same night he arranged to meet up with someone that he was at a gay bar in downtown Portland to have him give him a blowjob. And like
Wow.
that was what I figured out. Like I figured out through I was
Yeah.
like the name of the bar and like figuring out where it was. And when I saw that on the phone and saw that the dates added up and that he had responded, like I saw their whole message, like why that was there and nothing else was, I don't know. For me, it was like another God thing showing me
There's another
little,
neon sign,
yeah,
right?
another neon sign that
Yeah.
like I'm not crazy. Things really are bad.
Yeah.
So I woke him up. It was like 3 in the morning. We had people in town visiting us from up like in Seattle. And I didn't even care. Because like that day, the day before we had gone and done stuff, and he chose not to go. Like he just, and I was like, whatever. Um, so I was like, you have to leave right now. Like you have to leave. And I showed him the message and again, just like tears and just like regret, whatever, like all the things. I'm like, I don't care. So I made him leave. But then I was like worried about him that he would end up in some dive in Portland. Like I didn't want him to be there. So I contacted one of my friends who allowed him to like live in their extra like workout room. And I was like, perfect, go live there, but you can't live here because, this was right before I started my second round of chemo. So like it had to have been pretty bad for me to kick my husband out when I had three little girls. My baby now is like 5 months. And then I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, or I guess she had just turned 6. So a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a brand new baby.
But it
And
sounded like he wasn't really there for you to support you through all the other stuff in the past. I mean, so
no,
really this is not anything different for you, right?
no, like most women would have like not put up with this a long time
Yeah.
ago, but I had
Yeah.
been like slowly little drops like all along the way that I was used to functioning at this level. Oh, another thing that happened to him is he got really, really big. And so he'd had a bariatric surgery. So that was like another one of his addictions was food. Like I think when he had his bariatric surgery, he was like 380 pounds, like a big dude. Right. So then he's drinking alcohol on top of those bariatric surgeries. You get drunk faster and you feel sick faster. Um, so I kick him out and he's living with my friend and he's not making any changes. Like he just gets worse, right? He's not showing up for the girls. Like it's just a mess. And I'm so naive. Like I don't even think I realized what a sex addiction is. I don't think I'd ever even heard of a sex addiction. And yeah, so I still was kind of just blaming it. I think I didn't want to believe it. Like, I think I was in denial of what was happening because it was just so insane. And I'm not saying anything to anybody still. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
telling
Keeping
anybody
it
that story.
quiet.
The family knew that was there that he was gone. And I was just like, and they knew he was being jerked the day before. Like, they were not happy with how he was treating me, like in my condition, like in the state that I was in, you know? So he's gone. It's not getting better. He continues to be drunk. He's not showing up for the girls. Like he's just a disaster. Not going to work. So then we try going to therapy. Like I try getting into therapy again because we hadn't ever really. And we go and he just lies in therapy. Like he doesn't say, like he will own that he's talking about the pornography, but he won't own anything. And so I'm sitting there and he's just saying all these things that he wants me back. He wants all this stuff, but he's not talking about the problem. So then he writes me a letter. And that's in this letter, he's like, okay, you've asked me to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you everything. And so at this point, the only thing I know about is the pornography, the alcohol, and this one gay bar incident. That's all I know. Oh, no. And that he'd been on some dating chat rooms. Like, and so that's what I know. So he writes me this letter and he tells me that he has lost about 70 grand in gambling, like from gambling stuff, and that he has this pornography addiction that's been there since he was like 15, and that he has a problem with these online chat rooms that he had blamed on my little brother. That's like a whole other story, just addicts, blaming their problems on everybody.
Yeah.
So he's telling me all this stuff. And so that was the most I had ever heard from him. And so then he expected me to get that and just like take him back, be like, oh, great. But I didn't want to do that, obviously. So we take that. Anyway, that happened. So I told it he needed to tell his family because I was taking the girls. They just got out of school and I was going to go to Utah to just get away. Like I couldn't handle it anymore. And while I was gone, I was like, you can live in the house, but when we get home, you have to have an apartment. And so I took my girls and we were in Utah for 5 weeks. And the whole time he was trying to tell me that he's making all these changes and that things are better. But I was still like, nope, you still need to be in an apartment. But I was hopeful that he was
Yeah.
making changes. And I kind of went on my own journey. Like I was diving deep, like me and God, we were like this, like I was praying nonstop, like just like constantly, like praying my guts out, trying to do the right thing. So while we were there, he's telling me that he's getting better. I come home, he takes the girls and I find a condom in the washing machine. And so I asked him about it, and he said that he used it for masturbation. And I was like, well, that's not true. And so I find out that he had had girls in our house, sleeping with girls in our bedroom while
Oh,
I was in Utah with
goodness.
her. Yeah. So anyway, that happened. So then I knew that he'd had sex with somebody, obviously, because there was a condom, and I'm not a complete idiot. Although I did want to believe that that he was using it for that. But I was just so dumb. So then one of my friends came and talked to me, or no, another one of my sisters. I was just telling her that I was done and that I just couldn't do it anymore. And she said, Misty, she's like, he's sick. And I was like, what? I'm like, I know he is. She's like, and then she said to me, she's like, it's no different than your sickness in your brain. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you have a tumor. It's being treated. You have a team of doctors looking at you and treating you and doing MRIs and all of these things. He has nobody and he's had no help. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. Like he hasn't had any help. Like he's got this raging illness in his brain that can't be like objectified. Like you can't see it, but
Yeah.
it's very much there. And so that got me thinking about stuff and looking at like, and then I was like, I actually think that it's not, even though the alcoholism was what was in our face, like we saw it, we could see him drunk and sloppy. I was like, it's not the alcohol, it's the sex addiction. Like I felt so strongly that that's what it was. That's what we were dealing with. It wasn't so much the alcohol. The alcohol was a band-aid to cover this raging sex
Yeah, to
addiction.
cover the other one up.
And I didn't even know. I mean, at this point, I didn't know anything except for the blowjob thing in the chat rooms. Like, oh, but there were people reaching out to me on Facebook telling me that I needed to know what my husband was up to and that had done this with their friend. And then like I was getting all these messages from people. It was awful. It was awful. And so I talked to a facility. I found this place in St. George, Utah, and it's expensive, but it's for sex addiction. It's inpatient treatment. And I told him, I'm like, I really think you need to go here. We were ended up being able to talk to these people that had gone there and they kind of shared their experience and they got him like for just a minute. You know how it is with addicts. They're so in their head and they're not making any sense. You lose them. So like there's the person and I always think this is the addict and this is the person and this is what the addict does to the person, right? We
Yeah.
know that the person's there and it's a good person that's under there. But the addict is so powerful that it covers and acts for that person. So it's like we got this little moment where I was like, he was listening to me and he was like, yes, I'll go to rehab. And it was like, it was a God moment. Like God intervened to make that happen. And he said he would go. I finally, one of my friends is like, Misty, why isn't his family here helping? And I was like, oh my gosh, where is his family? So they finally came out and helped. So his sister comes out. She clears her schedule. She's a busy mom. She comes out to get him to go to rehab. You know, I had him for that moment where he was kind and he was listening, and then he turns back into the raging jerk, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not happy with him. I am pissed at him, right? Like he's not my favorite person at all. So they're packing up his stuff to be able to fly out the next day with his sister. And I said to him, and I regret this deeply because I do think that this played a big role in how the rest of the next 24 hours went. Because our words, this is what I have learned, that our words and the things that we say are Satan acting through us to get to that person. Like he wants them to be miserable and he uses us to make them miserable. And he for sure got to me and had me say this. And I said to him, I don't care how good you do at that rehab. I don't care if they put your freaking picture on the wall because you're the best student they've ever had. We are not going to be doing this afterwards. Like we're done. I'm like, this is for you to go get better, but then we are done. And that was really mean. And I think that that totally, like in his head, flipped the switch from him being willing to go, thinking that there was hope, to me pulling that away and him just changing his mind. So fast forward, they get on an airplane to go, they have to go through Vegas, unfortunately, to get to St. George, right? You fly into Vegas and then you drive 2 hours to get to St. George. And he ditched his sister in the Las Vegas airport and like just went on a drinking binge in the airport. She couldn't find him. She was gonna, I don't remember exactly what happened. Somehow, or maybe they had it, I don't remember. Maybe it was in Seattle. They flew to Seattle and then it was to Vegas. Somehow there was a connecting flight that he ditched her and didn't get on the flight and he had her fly to Utah. And so there he is now. He's in Las Vegas. And his sister calls me and she tells me what happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like
Welcome
this
to
really,
my world.
welcome to my world. This is the worst.
Yeah.
Um, so my kids, it was their first day of school. I just remember it all so clearly. And that night, I'm trying to call him. He's not answering the night before. This is when he's in Vegas. He's not answering. Um, I could see on his credit cards, he's pulling all these cash advances on like three different credit cards of like 5,000 a piece. And so I canceled the credit cards to like put a stop to him. And I called the cops hoping that maybe they could like find him and arrest him because I was just like, he's going crazy. Like, what do you do? You know? So I'm flaming mad. I'm so angry at him. And because I'd also pulled money from my 401k to pay for his rehab. That was the other thing I did. And he is just a mess. So the next morning, I get the kids off for their first day of school, and I was going to this religion class. And I remember getting there, I have my baby with me, and I didn't want to go in. I was like, I do not want to go. I don't want to be here today, but I also don't want to be at home, just whatever. So I made myself go in, and I'm sitting there and I'm just wanting to bolt. Like, I don't want to be there. And then the teacher, she was teaching about Paul from the New Testament. And the thing that she taught was what I just talked about recently, or right before, was about how Satan uses us to hurt others with our words. And she said that to me, and it just hit me. And I just had this overwhelming impression that I needed to go home and call him right there and then, and just make sure he was okay because he wasn't doing good. So I had been calling him and he hadn't been answering like the night before up into the morning. And so I went home and I remember I put my baby down for a nap and I call him on the phone and he answered and he was just bawling. And the words that came out of my mouth were not my words. They were not. And they were just telling him, we love you, we support you, we're caring about you, we're worried about you. And I was like, I'm coming to you. Don't get off the phone. Like it was just this, and he just like, it was, I had him, right? He wasn't consumed by the addict in that moment. Like I had him and he was listening to me. And I stayed with him on the phone until he got on a bus to get to St. George. And then I had my brother meet him there to help sober him up because he'd been drinking like all night, right? Like he was a hot mess. And so he got him into a hotel in St. George and was there with him. And then another friend came and brought him like some blankets and stuff like that. I had IV chemo that day. And at the time I had some friends there because they were there. We were making cookies for the kids for their first day of school. One of my friends got me a flight. It was a perfect flight for me to finish chemo, get on the plane. Another friend got me a rental car. And I went to my chemotherapy appointment, got my infusion. Someone picked me up. I was the last one on the airplane. I got there, I got my rental car, drove to St. George. I had Ativan there to help him with his tremors because I've taken care of patients and alcohol withdrawal, like I knew what to do. I got him as much sobered up as I could, and they were willing still to accept him at the rehab facility. So we went and we did all the things, signed all the paperwork. I got him there, and it was just like this so peaceful transition, like of just getting him to rehab. And it just was amazing, right? We got in there and anyway, all this stuff happened and he finished rehab and he did amazing. Like there was lots of stuff that happened obviously in between that. And then while he was there, I felt strongly that I needed to give him another chance, that this was the first time he'd been in rehab and I needed to help him. But one of the best things that happened while I was there was they would have family weekends. They'd have family come to the rehab facility. And one of the books that they had us read or that he had been reading and he told me that I needed to read was this book called Love is Letting Go of Fear by Gerald Jampolsky. And it's an old book. And there's an audio version of it and you listen to it and you just picture a guy sitting there with a mustache drinking coffee. Like it's funny, but it's profound. And it's all about forgiveness and how, anyway, he wanted me to listen to it. I was listening to it and I was like, of course he wants me to listen to this. Like, of course he does. This is ridiculous. Of course he wants me to forgive him and just move on. But as I was listening to it, I, for the first time in my life, realized the power of love and that love is for us. And in my mind for him, like this perfect love, this different love than like romantic love or like the love you have for your kids or whatever. There's this other level of love that made it so I could understand it in a way, and it touched me so profoundly and it helped change my whole mindset on how I viewed him and the situation that we were in. And it prepared me for what was coming next. So he he's in rehab. Like it's a beautiful, awesome facility. They're doing hikes, they have equine therapy, like it's amazing. But they're not able to talk on the phone or email, only letters in the mail. That's the only way of communicating. Um, so it was awesome. I was like, this is the best, right? Because it helped us talk in a different way. And so I go for this thing, and he's telling me that I need to go and have a session with him and his therapist, but the other families weren't doing this. And I was like, why are we doing it? And he said, because most of the wives here know why their husbands are here, but you know nothing. And I was like, okay, okay. So I'm going to this weekend knowing that I'm going to have this session. And I read this book. So in my mind, I'd already decided that I was going to forgive him for whatever it was that he said to me in that meeting. I already forgave him because he was there and he was working on it. And this was his first chance that he'd ever had. And I understood addiction and that it's beyond him and all of the things. So I went in with this beautiful mindset and truly was there in that place. Like whatever he says, I'm going to forgive him. He's working on it. Our family can be whole. And I go in, and nothing could have prepared me for what he told me. Because remember, at this point, I don't know anything. I know that
Yeah.
he'd been gambling. I know that he'd been on those chat rooms. People had been reaching out to me that he'd been like having conversations. I thought he'd had sex with somebody in our house, but I still wanted to believe that he hadn't because he told me he didn't. And like that's what I knew. And then I knew he had a pornography problem. So in that session is where he told me about that he'd been cheating on me since about 2008. So right now, currently it's 2017. So he'd been cheating on me for almost 9 years, with lots of people. So, and that he'd been going to these adult bookstores, which I didn't even know what that was. And if anybody wants to know what that is, I can educate them. But I don't think it's very appropriate to talk about here. But basically, it's where you can do things with anybody you want, any gender. You don't know who they are. There's a hole in the wall, and you can do whatever you want. And he
Yeah.
had tons of shame about this, tons and tons of shame over that. Like he hated that he was doing that. So basically, he'd been doing stuff with, we already knew this, like the other gender, like men and women. And he was telling me about how he'd gone on this trip a few years back. And the trip was weird, but he told me he had like slept with multiple women on that trip. And then there was another trip to Vegas that he'd gone with the same friend, mind you, on both of these trips. And he'd been having these like affairs, not affairs, like they never lasted long. In his mind, it was just sex, right? It wasn't anything serious, like whatever. So that was a gut punch, right? And then also he told me that the amount of money he'd gambled was actually closer to $100,000. And I was like, okay, like there was just all of this stuff, like so much. And I said again in the thing, I'm like, okay, what else? Like, what else is there? Like, that's what I kept asking him. And he's like, that's it. And I'm like, okay, like, and I like after the meeting, like I was still processing and then I had an evening where it was hard and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I was still just praying my guts out and still felt like forgiveness is the answer. Love is the answer. And so I was all in. I finished chemo the same week that he finished rehab. So in my
Wow.
mind, it was like this beautiful thing. Like my brain was healed, his brain was healed, like got treatment, and we were in this place where we could start this new beautiful life. And so he comes home. That was December 2017. He comes home and he was good for about 6 weeks. And then so part of the thing with him leaving rehab is that we were going to track him on his phone and I would be able to see his location, like all of these things. So fast forward, we're sitting at home, I'm getting dinner ready, and my daughter says to me, she's like, "Where's dad?" And I was like, "Oh, he has to work late," because that's what he told me, which is dumb. The company that he worked for never had them stay late. They never did overtime, none of this. Which another thing, his company kept his job for him the whole time he was gone.
Holy
Like
cow.
he got to come home to a wife, a house, kids, a job, car, all the things. And he got paid short-term disability while he was in rehab. Like just like his company was amazing to him.
Hmm.
And so it's like an hour later than what he said he was going to be home. And I'm like, oh, he's just working late. And so then I'm like, look at the location. I look at it and I looked at it earlier and it looked like he was at work. But when I really looked at it, it was actually not. It was like a mile or two away. And so I pack up the girls and we get in the car to go look for him. And I find him in front of a Panda Express using their Wi-Fi, jacking off in the car with a bottle of vodka in the car. And I was
Oh,
like,
here
oh
we
my
go
God,
again.
this isn't happening. This isn't happening. And he wouldn't get out of the car. It was a whole thing. And he drove off. I called the cops trying to like let them know that there was a drunk driver on the roads. They didn't find him. He comes home, whatever. I'm like, okay, this is a relapse. This is a relapse. Like they said this would happen. Love him through it, get him to his meetings. We do that. So then the next one, it was Valentine's Day. I always do a big Valentine's Day dinner. Like it's something I've always done. And I have it all ready, and he doesn't come home. So me and the girls are sitting there. He's not coming home, and they're crying because dad's not home. I'm just like, what the hell? What's his problem? Where is he? I find him again. He's in these adult bookstores. I see his location and I go track him. I know he's there. He sneaks out the back. I had to go into that horrible place. Like it was the worst. And I end up not getting him. He comes home later that night. I'm like, okay, it's another relapse. It's fine. Like, we're going to figure this out. We're getting him help. I'm trying to get him into a therapist that understands sex addiction. Like, we're doing all the things. And then, like a week, like these all happened pretty close to each other. And so then the third time and final time, I can track him. He's such an idiot. Like, I can track him on his phone. He thinks I'm tracking his car. Like, I'm not tracking your car, you dork. So I find him, I call a friend to take the girls to be with them so I can go find their dad. And I find his car and his phone. Oh, he'd gotten a burner phone. That was one of the first relapses. Like he'd had a burner phone. That's how he was looking at porn. And then I find his wedding ring, first of all, sitting on the dash, like he'd taken it off. And then I see my girls' tablets in the car. Like we couldn't find the tablets. I just thought we had lost them. I didn't know where they were. He had them in his car and he was using those to look at porn on the tablets. So that made me mad. The wedding ring off, the tablets in the car, our daughter's tablets. I was like, holy crap. So I go into this bar, this trashy bar in like the trashiest area of Portland. And there he is with this huge woman with her huge boobs and her long nails, like all over him. They're just like making out in front of like slot machines. And I was like, here I am, like my hair is growing back, but I'm still like bald-ish, like really short. Like
Yeah.
anyway, I go and I tap him on the shoulder and I was just like, "Are you having fun?" And he just looked at me in his drunk, like, that glazed over state.
Blades. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I was just like, let's go. And so I just get him in the car, and all I said to him was, you got to feel really good about yourself right now. Or, oh, no, no, I didn't say that. I said, you must feel really bad right now. And he was like, I do. And then we didn't say anything for the rest of the drive. And I took him on top of this hill in the town that we lived in. And I was like, I got out of the car. I went to his side of the car. I opened the door. It's like February. It's cold. And I'm like, get out. And he gets out of the car. And then I just left him there. And it was like the best feeling of my life. Like, it was like the first win for me in months. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so then I had a friend go back with me to that bar to get the other car that was there. And I just chucked his wedding ring out the window. And I was just like, I'm done, you know? And so then I had somebody say to me along the way too, like when I was going through all of this with him, they're like, Misty, you matter too. Like you also matter. Like I know you're trying to do what's right and you're trying to show love and forgiveness and all of these things, but you also matter. And I think that was like the first time that anyone had ever said that to me that hit me in that way. Because I was trying so hard to do what God wanted me to do. I was trying so hard to love him through his addiction and help him through these relapses that I lost sight of like, I do matter and my girls matter. And this isn't okay. Like this isn't what God wants for me. Like this isn't okay. Like I've done my part. And then I learned too that I could love him, but I didn't have to be married to him. Like that was something that I had power to do. And so I was able to, you know, finally get to a place where I was like, that's it. Like, I'm getting a divorce. Because I had told him when we got out of rehab, I said, I'm not doing this with you again. I'm like, this was your chance. I'm like, I am not going to be that girl who puts up with this forever. Like, me and the girls deserve better. And this is your chance. So, this is your opportunity to clean it up and get better. And then he kept like the relapses were bad. Like, I don't think that they were like these little, like, how to drink relapses. Like, they were really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I finally got the balls to file for divorce. And even then, even still, as I filed, I was so hopeful that in that time, that period of time, that he would change, that we would be enough for him, that he would want to change and get better because he had this beautiful life, like all of these things. And I honestly feel like me getting my brain tumor had nothing to do with me, but everything to do about him, for him to see that like he was losing things and for him to clean up his act. And he had that choice to do it, but he chose not to, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's like you said, Misty, the addiction has such a hold on them. I like to use, I'm a big fan of eagles and hawks, and their talons are so sharp and they can carry so much weight. And
yeah,
like you showed it earlier, it's like those talons grab a hold of them and they're in so deep. And every once in a while you can get one or two out, but even three of them in there is enough to hang on to them,
yeah,
and I did the same thing that you did. I stood by her for 8 years, 9 years of it, thinking that, I mean, I even told one of her therapists once when she said, Al, there's nothing you can do. And I pointed my finger at her face and I says, you effing watch me. You effing watch me. I'll get her better. And I
yeah,
still did it for another 3 years before the light bulb finally went off for me and went, my gosh, she's right. There's nothing I can do. It has to be their choice. And it is their journey, and you said it quite a few times. And I was almost like this, what you was saying, it's almost like you're telling my story too. Yours was a heck of a lot more dramatic with all the other stuff you were going through with your own personal health and having a new baby and you got your other kids. I didn't have none of that on my end.
yeah. Oh,
Wanting to hang on and save that marriage, because when I got married again, I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm not going to go through this again, and here we are, we're coming up on 18 years together. And but that light bulb finally went off. She went 2.5 years clean. And
yeah,
after 2.5 years, she went back into it and it got worse. It's like it keeps them away, but then when it draws them back, man, it brings it back 100, if not 1,000 fold. And I think we finally get to a point in our life where we go, you know what? My life does matter. Your friend was 100% right. And it's time for us to move forward. And I've also gone back and connected the dots. And just by reading your bio and what you've shared, we went through that journey to put us exactly where we're at right now, because now we have the capability of lending our hand out and helping other individuals who have been suffering, not necessarily saying the same thing, but other trauma and BS that's happening in their life. And we wouldn't be able to be in the position where we're at if we had not lived through it ourselves.
right. Totally.
Yeah. So I
And it's
tip
hard
my hat
because,
off to you.
well, you know what? It's made me better. And a part of me, like, and there still has been so much more. Like, it's hard because, again, there's the person. He was a
Yeah,
good person, like, had his whole
absolutely.
life together. And since all this has happened, he went further down the drain. Currently, he just got out of prison for child pornography. So his sex addiction just got worse. So I don't know how much people know about sex addictions, but the natural progression of it is that it starts with pornography. And then it starts to like, it heads into like online chat rooms or things like that. Like, and then it heads to like actually having sex with someone else that's not your spouse or your partner. And then it goes to like going with opposite gender, like experimenting there. And then it goes to child pornography. And then it goes to actually doing something to a child. Like those are the natural progressions of a sex addiction. Um, and yeah, and he went down. So like he was living on the streets. He currently is living in an RV downtown Salt Lake that he moves every few days so it doesn't get a ticket, and working at Maverick. He went from being a financial advisor for a huge financial firm to that. It's incredibly sad. It is
Yeah.
incredibly sad. And it's sad because he continues to fall into that rut of addiction. So I like to look at addiction as a trench that runs parallel in your life. Like you absolutely can get out of the trench. Absolutely. But it's always the trench is always going to be there. Just like on a road, there's the gutter that's there.
Yeah.
And as we
Yeah.
drive, we know that we can't veer into the gutter because it will catch our tire and suck us in, right? And cause lots of damage to our car and to us and ruin our day. And so we don't go to the ditch. Like we know it's there. We keep two hands on the wheel and but we get distracted sometimes and our tires touch it and then we overcorrect or, whatever happens. But it's just like addiction. Like you can get out of it, but it's always going to be there. And you have to be aware of the pit that you could fall into and just keep doing the things you need to do to stay on the right path, to stay out of addiction as much as you can. But it's really hard to get your whole car out of the
Yeah.
ditch, you
Yeah.
know?
And it takes those baby steps, right? Because it took a certain amount of time to get the whole car in that rut or in that ditch.
Yeah, it didn't
It takes
happen
just
overnight.
amount of time, if not longer, to get ourselves back out. And I think what happens is a lot of that frustration we start getting into because us as human beings, right? Nowadays we want everything snap, snap, right? I want to be a
Yep.
millionaire. I want it to happen in a week. Oh my gosh, it's not a week. Okay, never mind. I give up.
Yeah, exactly. We're a
And
now
so
society.
yeah, we have to give ourselves that opportunity. And I had a guest on my show real quick here because we've gone way over an hour, which is fine, which is definitely fine. He battled a pornography addiction as well and has a business, was looking at committing suicide, prayed before he was getting ready to jump off a bridge in another state with his family here. And this voice came through his head that said, "Why are you not celebrating the days that you didn't use?" And he stopped and he got thinking, and he called his wife, flew his wife out to where he was at. They sat in the hotel room. He canceled some of his meetings. They talked for so long and they prayed and he had opened up to her, and he's coming from a very LDS family, religious type family, right? And can imagine
Yeah.
the shame that he was dealing with inside and the guilt. And he said he started finally telling himself, I'm going to start celebrating the days that I didn't use instead of beating myself up for the days that I did. And
What
he
a
goes,
powerful
right?
mindset shift. Yeah.
Very powerful. And he said before he knew it, he was 3 months, then he was 8 months, then he was a year and a half, and then he's 3 years, and then he's 6 years. And he says it's crazy because he just put that whole shift in going, okay, if I slip, I slip, but I'm not going to let it beat me up. I'm going to continue to keep fighting. I'm going to keep doing my best to steer myself out of that rut. Like I used to be a big hunter, right? On days, especially during the gun hunt or even the bow hunt, when it would rain or snow and your car, like you said, slips in that rut and you're trying to get out of that rut.
Mhm.
You just keep fighting, and all of a sudden you got the first wheel out, but the back wheel's
Right.
still in. You do everything that you can, put wood under it or rocks or whatever you can to
Yeah.
get yourself out. So I love this whole story, and again, a good for you because to go through what you were going through health wise, and you're the only other person that I have talked to that stuck with it like as long as I did as well. And I think you even went longer than I did. It's that faith and it's that belief and it's that love. However, there does come time to it. We do come to a point where we do realize my love is still there for that individual because I know they're there. I know they're inside there. However, I cannot give love to my kids. I cannot give love to others the way I want to fully give that love until I allow myself to get out of this and start loving myself again and believing in myself. And then I think that's when people like ourselves start seeing a whole new change in our life happening. And it
And
is
I think
because
that's
of our
another thing
higher power.
I think that's another thing I learned though too is that sometimes loving the addict is not loving them at all. It's actually enabling them. And love looks different, right? Loving them is letting them go. And that doesn't feel right. Like when you're trying to love,
Doesn't.
because it looks different. But like that's where like I try to help people see that like it's actually the most loving thing you can do for them. Whether they'll be angry, they'll be angry at you. They'll think you're the worst. They'll call you names. They'll blame everything on you. Like I'm going through that right now with him. Like everything's my fault. And I'm like, okay, but it's not, like I'm trying to preserve your relationship with your girls. Like, and that's a loving thing that I'm doing for him. He doesn't see that though. He sees it as me being the bad guy,
Yeah.
and that's how addicts are. Like, when an addict is in recovery, when they own their crap. If they're still blaming everyone around them for all of their problems, they are not in recovery.
Yeah.
Like that is a golden sign that, you
Yep.
know, like that's how
Very
you
well
know
put.
very
Yeah.
well. It's a good test. Like, are
Yeah.
they owning their stuff, you know, or are
Yep.
they still blaming so and so for this and this job for that and that boss and blah, 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 like, no, no one can make you do anything. And if we can I love the Tony Robbins quote that says, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're thinking about all the like the hard, just like this guy who said when he started focusing on the days he didn't use and the beautiful things that came from that, there
Yeah.
is such power there. Like that is a beautiful thing, you know? And there's so much to learn through addiction. Like for me, it's been my greatest teacher. It's been my greatest source of pain for me and my kids. But I choose to believe that it has made them better and it's made me better and it's made me more empathetic to addicts because I'm able to see them as I like to view people as like children, like toddlers. Like if you think about an addict as this cute little chubby faced 2-year-old, perfect in every single way. And then you pause and you look at them and like, what happened to them? What happened along their way? What pain was in their life? Like, who didn't love them enough or hurt them that molded them into this person that made them turn to addiction to get their needs met, and then or change their mindset. Like, we were all perfect in the beginning, perfect, you know? And so for me, if I can look at the addict in that light, it is helpful to me to love them wholly and to help them get on a better path and to see their own goodness because it's there. It's just that addict is just covering them,
Yeah.
you know?
Just got to help them break that shell, right? Because once you can
Yeah.
get some cracks in it,
Yeah.
it's like watching a duck or any kind of animal being hatched out of an egg, right? You first get those little teeny cracks, and before you know it, they're getting out and they got their beak out or they got a wing or a leg out. It's
Yeah.
like a whole new rebirth, and really that's what it is. It's a rebirth because they really start finding out, and I'm sure you see this all the time in your line of work. You see this whole new person emerge that this person didn't even know was there. And I mean, it's happened with me, right? The last 15 years, I go back to look at who I was in my life all the way up until 2009 and to see where I have come, who I am today. If it wasn't for my weekend usage and my ex-wife's alcoholism, and also the people God has put in my life while I've been on this new journey, my gosh, I'm like, why couldn't I have been this person back then? What I could have accomplished, what I could have done, how many more people I could have helped. However, I've had to stop myself and go, you know what? That wasn't my journey. I had to go through all this to get to me, to get to where I'm at today, because that's what got me here.
Yeah. And that was your journey, your
That,
period of growth.
yep,
And it was perfect because
yep,
now you're able to help people that you wouldn't have been able to help otherwise.
yeah,
You know,
like
the way
yourself.
the way your life is going is exactly how it was supposed to go. And we can choose to look at our lives as why is this happening for me instead of to me?
Yeah,
It's a huge mindset shift that can be powerful because everything around us, we can choose to think it's happening to us, like, woe is me, or we can choose to think that it's happening for us.
yeah.
Like, how are we supposed to get better because of these experiences? Like, what
What,
good can we do because we're going through this?
yeah, what's the
Doesn't
lesson
feel better in
behind
the
it,
moment.
right?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
like, we're all here to help each other. Like, that, I really do feel that that's like our purpose here on earth
Amen.
is to help each other be our best selves and get back, you
Yep.
know? And it's loving each other and serving one another and helping each other in the hard. Because there's a lot of hard. And
Yeah.
addiction is hard. But like I think that the message for me is that don't let it make you make meaning about yourself. If you're on the other side of addiction, if you're supporting an addict, like don't let their relapses or falls make meaning about who you are, right? Because that person needs you to be whole too, so that you can be there for them and be an example to them and be a strong rock. You know, when we let the addict make us feel less than, then they win.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
So true. Misty, it has been an absolute pleasure having you. And again, thank you to Charles for introducing us.
yeah,
It was great to have you on the show, and I wish you all the best in your new endeavors, and wish you tons of blessings and love with your new relationship and where life is
thank you.
taking you, and again, thank you for what you are doing to help other individuals. Is there
Same.
anything else you'd like to share? One last thing before we sign off here.
No, I'm sorry that I got so wordy.
No,
Sometimes
it's
it's a lot.
okay.
But I appreciate you doing this. All the goodness that goes out in the world makes a difference, and it's going to come back to you tenfold. Like, I really do believe that. So, thank you for putting goodness out there in the world and being a bright light. And I think the stories of addiction need to be shared because they help people. They help people realize that they're not alone. And I hope that something I said can register with someone out there who's in a relationship with an addict and doesn't know what to do. And I'm here to talk if anyone ever needs help or advice, or if you've been in a similar situation that I'm in, I'm here for it. So reach out.
Yeah, and how would they find you? Because I believe your information's on the bio, but if not, please make sure I get all your information so I can put
Yeah.
it on the show. So how would they find you?
So I have a website. It's www.amore mental health. Obviously, love Amore, because I really do think love is the answer to
Yep.
everything in this life. And then also you can find me on Instagram at Amoré Mental Health. I'm on both of those things.
Okay. Awesome. I love that. Again,
Okay.
Misty, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Hey guys, again, thank you to all our guests, our past guests, all our past sponsors, and definitely to all you listeners. You guys are the ones that's continuous to make this possible. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be going as long as we have. So thank you very much. Going to leave you with this as we do at the end of every show. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.